Marge was in bed with a man. All of a sudden, they heard a noise downstairs. The man said, "Oh my gosh, your husband is home. What am I going to do?" "Just stay in bed with me. He's probably so drunk he isn't going to notice you here with me." The fear of getting caught trying to escape was more powerful than the thought of getting caught in bed with Marge, so he trusted her advice. Marge's husband came crawling into bed, and as he pulled the covers over him, he pulled the blankets, exposing 6 feet. "Honey!" he yelled. "What is going on? I see 6 feet at the end of the bed." "Dear, you're so drunk, you can't count. If you don't believe me, count them again." The husband got out of bed and counted 1, 2, 3, and 4. "Gosh, you're right, dear." An American, an Englishman, and a Mexican are in a hot air balloon. After being stranded for a few hours, the Englishman drops a tea bag out of the balloon and says, "We have too many of these in my country." The Mexican then throws a burrito out of the balloon and says, "We have way too many of these in my country." Then the American throws the Mexican out of the balloon. The Englishman asks him, "Why did you do that?" He replies, "He slept with my wife." A man is driving through the countryside. He passes an old Catholic church and he sees a group of boys outside putting their buddy in the snow. He pulls over and runs up to the church, bangs on the door, and a nun answers. He says, "Sister, how come these boys have their buddy in the snow? What's going on?" The nun replies, "Oh, don't worry. Father Flanagan likes a couple cold ones after Mass." A man is lost in the woods, and it is getting dark. As he walks through the woods, he spots a small cabin. He knocks on the door, and an elderly man opens it. "I'm lost in the woods and need somewhere to stay for the night." The man says, "Can I please stay here?" "Sure," says the elderly man, "but I have one rule. Don't do anything inappropriate with my daughter. If you do, you'll regret it." The man agrees to the rule. That evening, during diner, the daughter comes downstairs, and he's immediately taken aback by her beauty. "This old man won't know," the man thinks to himself. That night, the man sneaks into the daughter's room, and they spend the night together. The next morning, the man wakes up to find a huge rock placed on his chest. There's a note that reads, "Torture number 1, rock on chest." The man chuckles, thinking it's a harmless prank. He tosses the rock aside, but as he gets up to leave the room, he notices another sign. It says, "Torture number 2, rock tied to a sensitive area." The man's eyes widen, realizing the situation is more serious than he thought. In a panic, he jumps out of the window, hoping to escape with only a few bumps and bruises. As he falls, he sees one last note on the ground, "Torture number 3, left side tied to the bedpost." Wait, want to make a difference? For every 1,000 subscribers and likes, I'll donate $100 to a senior in need. Help me help the elderly. Subscribe now. Steve from Texas is waiting for his big surgery when his anesthesiologist walks into the room with his equipment. Steve swallows nervously and asks, "Excuse me, would you mind explaining to me how you'll put me under? This is my first time." "Oh, sure," said the anesthesiologist kindly. "Don't worry. I only use the best drugs, and I have lots of experience measuring just the right amount. You won't feel a thing, and will wake up with no side effects at all." "Oh," breathed Steve. "That's awesome. Thanks, Doc." "Sure," said the doctor. "By the way, are you insured with any of our—" No," said Steve. "I don't have insurance." "Ah, I see," says the anesthesiologist and begins to sing, "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star." There were 3 receptionists at a convention each talking about how dodgy their co-workers were. The first said, "Nobody is more dodgy than car salesmen. My colleagues will patch up a car so that it will drive just far enough away from the yard before it breaks down and then claim that it was in perfect working order." The second said, "That's nothing. I work in a law office. They'll represent your co-workers in court and make sure that they aren't responsible for that lemon. They're the dodgiest." "Wow," the third receptionist said. "That hits close to home. I recently bought a car that did exactly that. I drove it to work and parked, but when I came out after work, it wouldn't start. I took the car yard to court, and their lawyer successfully argued that they weren't at fault." "So which was dodgier?" the first asked. "My colleagues. I work for the local police, and while I was sitting in my broken-down car in the station car park, trying to get it started, one of my colleagues reversed into me and then arrested me for reckless driving." A stoner is walking along the beach when he stumbles upon an old, dusty lamp. Curiosity gets the best of him, so he picks it up, gives it a rub, and poof, a genie appears. "Mortal, you have summoned me, and you may have 3 wishes," the genie says, eyeing him seriously. "What is your first wish?" The stoner, already in a mellow mood, grins. "All right, for my first wish, let's smoke a joint together." The genie, though a bit surprised, shrugs. With a snap of his fingers, a joint appears and they light up, passing it back and forth in silence, enjoying the ocean breeze. After a few minutes, the genie says, "What's your second wish?" The stoner, eyes half closed, nods and says, "For my second wish, let's smoke another one." The genie obliges, conjuring up another joint, and they repeat the process, sinking deeper into relaxation. Once that joint's burned down, the genie clears his throat. "So what's your third wish?" The stoner thinks for a second, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Okay, for my third wish, let's smoke one more." The genie raises an eyebrow but obliges him. So they spark up one last joint, and after they finish, the genie disappears into the lamp. A minute later, he pops out with chicken nuggets in his hand and asks, "So what's your fourth wish?" One day, little Johnny was deep in thought and decided to ask his dad, "Dad, how come big dogs can make little dogs and big cats can make little cats, but big trains don't make little trains?" Johnny's dad chuckled and replied, "Well, Johnny, that's a great question for your mother." Curious, Johnny went to his mom and asked, "Mom, why do big dogs make little dogs? Big cats make little cats, but big trains don't make little trains." His mom smiled and said, Johnny, I think that's a question for Mr. Jones down at the railroad yard." Determined to get an answer, Johnny headed to the yard and asked Mr. Jones, "Mr. Jones, why do big dogs make little dogs? Big cats make little cats, but big trains don't make little trains." Mr. Jones thought for a moment, looked at Johnny, and grinned. "Well, Johnny, that's because Union Pacific always pulls out on time." The young wife went into labor while her husband was overseas serving in the war. The next day, he got the news that his wife had delivered twins. He got to a phone and called her right away. "Oh, honey, I'm so happy," he said. "Who took you to the hospital?" "Your brother Joe drove me, and since I had to be anesthetized, he named the twins." The husband was horrified. But Joe is an idiot." "Oh no, what did he name them?" The wife answered, "We have a girl and a boy. Joe named the girl Denise." The husband interrupted, "Well, that's not so bad. What did he name the boy?" "Joe named the boy D-Nephew." After 50 years of marriage, I looked at my wife and said, "You know, 50 years ago, we had a small, inexpensive house, a clunky old car, slept on a sofa bed, and watched TV on a 10-inch black and white screen. But every night, I got to sleep next to a hot 23-year-old woman. Now we have a $500,000 house, a $45,000 car, a luxurious bed, and a big screen TV. But I share that bed with a 69-year-old woman. It seems like you're not holding up your end of the bargain." My wife, being the practical and wise woman she is, calmly replied, "Well then, go ahead and find yourself a hot 23-year-old. Just know that I'll make sure you're back in that cheap house, driving a junk car, sleeping on a sofa bed, and watching TV on a 10-inch black and white screen. Aren't older women amazing? They really have a knack for solving problems with a touch of humor and a whole lot of wisdom. A sign in a restaurant window reads, "If you order it and we don't have it, you instantly win $1 million." A man walking by notices the sign and walks into the restaurant, sitting down with a smirk. The waiter asks for his order, and the man requests white rhinoceros stew. Surprisingly, the waiter returns with a steaming bowl of exactly that. The man, taken aback, eats the expensive meal and leaves angrily after paying. The next day, he returns with the same smirk and orders bullet ants stuffed with dolphin meat. The waiter promptly brings him his requested dish. Once again, the man, surprised, eats his meal, pays, and leaves in frustration. On the third day, he sits down and asks for a lactating mermaid breast sandwich. After a few minutes, the waiter returns with 2 large duffel bags containing $1 million. Ecstatic, the man exclaims, "I knew it! You don't have mermaid breast!" The waiter politely responds, "We actually do, sir. We just ran out of bread." When God created the donkey, he said, "You will work tirelessly day and night, carrying heavy burdens on your back. You will eat grass and have a low IQ, and you will live for 50 years. The donkey replied, "But Lord, 50 years of such a life is too much. Please grant me only 30 years to live." And so it was. Next, God created the dog. As a dog, you will guard man's property and remain loyal to him. You will eat leftovers and live for 25 years. The dog pleaded, "Oh Lord, this life is too hard. Please, give me only 10 years to live." And so it was. Then God created the monkey. You will swing from tree to tree, entertaining people with your antics. Your life will last 20 years. The monkey begged, "Lord, please, don't make me live for so long in this way. Give me only 10 years, I beg you." And so it was. Finally, God created man. You are a man, the most intelligent being on earth. You will use your wisdom to rule over the creatures and dominate the world. Your life will last 20 years. Man replied, "Oh God, 20 years is too short. I need more time to fulfill my purpose. Please grant me the donkey's 20 years, the dog's 15 years, and the monkey's 10 years." And so it was. Since then, a man lives his life in stages. He spends the first 20 years as a man, full of energy and intelligence. Then he gets married and works as a donkey for 20 years, carrying heavy loads day and night. After that, he has children and lives as a dog, guarding the house, eating leftovers, and serving his family. Finally, when he grows old, he becomes like a monkey, entertaining his grandchildren by acting foolishly. Thus, life unfolds in this amusing and often humbling way. After 37 years of marriage, Jake left his wife, Edith, for his young secretary. His new girlfriend insisted they live in Jake and Edith's luxurious multi-million-dollar home. With better lawyers on his side, Jake prevailed in court and gave Edith just 3 days to move out. On the first day, Edith packed her belongings into boxes, crates, and suitcases. On the second day, movers came to take her things. On the third day, she sat down for a final meal at their elegant dining table. By candlelight, with soft music in the background, she enjoyed a feast of shrimp, caviar, and Chardonnay. When she finished, Edith walked into every room of the house and stuffed half-eaten shrimp shells dipped in caviar into the hollow spaces of the curtain rods. She cleaned up the kitchen and left the house for good. When Jake and his new girlfriend moved in, everything seemed perfect for a few days. Then an unrelenting stench began to fill the house. They tried everything: deep cleaning, airing out the rooms, checking vents for dead animals, and even replacing the carpets. Exterminators were called in, and air fresheners were placed everywhere. Nothing worked. The smell became so unbearable that friends stopped visiting, Repair workers refused to enter, and even the housemaid quit. Desperate, they decided to sell the house. Despite cutting the price in half, no buyers showed interest. The foul odor had earned the house a notorious reputation, and even local realtors stopped taking their calls. Eventually, Jake and his girlfriend had to borrow a large sum of money to buy a new home. One day, Edith called Jake to ask how he was doing. He vented about the house's unbearable smell and their struggles to sell it. Edith listened sympathetically and mentioned how much she missed her old home. She offered to take the house back in exchange for a significant reduction in her divorce settlement. Desperate to be rid of the house, Jake agreed. He quickly sold it to her at a fraction of its original value, provided she signed the papers that same day. Edith agreed and finalized the deal within hours. A week later, Jake and his girlfriend stood watching movers pack their belongings to transfer to their new home. As they smiled, satisfied to leave the nightmare behind, the movers loaded up everything, including the curtain rods. Remember, every 1,000 subscribers and likes means $100 donated to a senior in need. Let's make a real impact. Don't forget to subscribe. 3 blondes decide to go hunting. While they are in the field, they stumble across a set of tracks. The first one exclaimed, "Oh, look, deer tracks." The second one said, "You dummy, those are definitely moose tracks." The third one chimed in and said, "You're both wrong. Those are the biggest bear tracks I've ever seen." They started arguing about who was right and who was wrong. After about an hour, they decided it was moose tracks. And that's when the train hit them. A father, walking past his son's bedroom, was surprised to see the bed perfectly made and everything neatly in its place. On the pillow sat an envelope, prominently addressed, "Dad." With a sinking feeling, he picked it up, opened it, and began to read the letter inside, his hands trembling. "Dear Dad, it is with deep regret and sorrow that I'm writing this letter. I had to run away with my new girlfriend, Stacy, because I wanted to avoid a confrontation with you and Mom. I found real love and passion with Stacy. She's amazing, but I know you wouldn't approve of her because of her piercings, tattoos, tight motorcycle clothes, and the fact that she's much older than me. But it's not just about the passion, Dad. Stacy's pregnant. She said we're going to be very happy together. She owns a trailer deep in the woods and has a big stack of firewood to last the whole winter. We're also praying that science will soon find a cure for AIDS so Stacy can get better. She really deserves it. Don't worry about me, Dad. I'm 15, and I know how to take care of myself. Someday we'll come back to visit so you can meet your many grandchildren. Love, your son, Joshua," but none of the above is true. I'm over at Jason's house. I just wanted to remind you there are worse things in life than the school report card on the kitchen table. Call me when it's safe to come home. While driving through the backwoods of Montana, a man noticed a weathered shanty-style house with a sign out front that read, "Talking dog for sale." Intrigued, he pulled over and knocked on the door. The owner stepped out and said casually, "The dog's in the backyard." Curious, the man walked around to the backyard and found a friendly-looking Labrador retriever sitting calmly. "You can talk?" he asked, half joking. "Yep," the dog replied. The man's jaw dropped. Once he recovered, he stammered, "So, what's your story?" The lab gave a little shrug and began, "Well, I discovered I could talk when I was a pup. Naturally, I wanted to do something meaningful, so I contacted the CIA. They were thrilled to hire me, and soon I was jetting around the world. I'd sit in on meetings with spies and world leaders, gathering secrets because, let's face it, who would suspect a dog? I was their top agent for years." The man listened, stunned as the lab continued. "But the constant travel wore me down. As I got older, I decided to take a quieter job at the airport, working undercover security. I'd stroll around, eavesdropping on shady characters. I uncovered major criminal operations, earned a bunch of awards, and eventually retired. Now, I just hang out here, enjoying my golden years." The man was in awe. He rushed back to the front of the house and said to the owner, "How much do you want for this dog?" $10, the owner replied. $10? The man exclaimed. "This dog is incredible. Why so cheap?" The owner shook his head and said, "Because he's a liar. He's never left the yard." An elderly man visits the doctor for a routine checkup. After the exam, the doctor says, "You're in good health. Is there anything you'd like to ask about?" The man replies, "Actually, yes. After spending time with my wife, I often feel hot and sweaty. But if it happens again later, I feel cold and chilly. What's going on?" Later, the doctor speaks with the man's wife and mentions the concern. "Your husband says he feels hot and sweaty the first time, but cold and chilly the second time. Do you know why?" The wife chuckles and says, "Oh, that's simple. The first time is in summer and the second is in winter." Old couple's fun memory. One day, Jim asks his wife, "Do you remember our first date behind the old tavern 50 years ago? We had so much fun." She smiles warmly. "Of course, it feels like yesterday." Jim grins. "How about we go back there for old time's sake?" She laughs. "Why not? Let's do it." A young police officer overhears their conversation and decides to follow them out of curiosity. The couple walks slowly to the tavern, leaning on each other for support. Once there, they share a sweet moment reminiscing. The officer watches, touched by their love and energy. As they walk back, the officer stops them. "It's so inspiring to see your bond after all these years. What's your secret to keeping the spark alive?" The old man smiles and says, "It's all about making time for each other and cherishing every moment." A Nobel Prize-winning mathematician is traveling from university to university on a speaking tour by limousine. After several engagements, the mathematician and his driver are having dinner, and the driver says, "I've heard your speech so many times I think I could give it word for word." The mathematician accepts the challenge, and they switch places for the next speech. The driver dresses like the professor, and the professor dresses as the driver and sits in the back of the auditorium. The driver gives the speech flawlessly and opens up the floor for a question. Usually, there are none. But one of the students at the university has a very large ego and decides to attempt to stump the Nobel Prize winner. After the student asks his question for 10 straight minutes, the driver laughs and says, "That question is so simple, I'll let my driver in the back answer it." A young man went into confession crying and told the priest, "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned." "What have you done?" asked the priest. "A few weeks ago, I went to the library. I remained there until closing time, and when I was about to go home, rain started pouring down. It was so intense I had to wait in the library. I had waited for a while with the librarian, a young, attractive, single girl. Then one thing led to another, and I ended up sleeping with her." The man stopped talking, but kept weeping. "Well, don't cry. It's a sin, but it is not that bad. You should say 5 Hail Marys and it will be forgiven," said the priest. "But it doesn't end there," the man kept sobbing. "A few days later, my elderly neighbor asked me to help her with her computer. Her husband was hospitalized and she couldn't send an email to her son. I went there and fixed the problem, but when I was about to leave, rain started pouring down. It was really stormy and I had to wait. One thing led to another and I ended up sleeping with the old lady," the man cried. "Oh dear, well, that makes it harder indeed. But still, you should say 15 Hail Marys and you will be forgiven," said the priest. "Oh, I'm afraid the worst part is still ahead," cried the man. "Yesterday I went to the barber. I was his last client that day. As soon as he finished and was about to close the shop, rain started pouring down so intensely. I had to wait with him. One thing led to another, and I ended up sleeping with him as well," the man cried. "Oh dear, it is indeed worse than I thought," said the priest. "So what should I do, Father?" the man asked. "Well," answered the priest, "you should get thee out of here before it starts raining." A man and his pregnant wife go to the doctor because she has started labor. When they arrive, the doctor tells them of a great new invention he has made. He made a machine that can transfer pain from the mother to the father. The couple is ecstatic and quickly agrees, but the doctor warns the man, "Even 10% of the pain is probably more pain than you've ever felt." They start at 10%, and the husband is not affected at all. He insists they move it up to 50%. He's still not fazed by the pain, but his wife is feeling a lot better. So he tells the doctor to give him all of the pain. The woman has her baby with no pain, and they are all very happy. When they get home, the UPS man is dead on the porch. Several men are in the locker room of a golf club. A cell phone on a bench rings, and a man engages the hands-free speaker function and begins to talk. Everyone else in the room stops to listen. Man: "Hello?" Woman: "Honey, it's me. Are you at the club?" Man: "Yes." Woman: "I am at the mall now and found this beautiful leather coat. It's only $10,000. Is it okay if I buy it?" Man: "Sure. Go ahead if you like it that much." Woman: "I also stopped by the Mercedes dealership and saw the new 2008 models. I saw one I really liked." Man: "How much?" Woman: $100,000. Man: "Okay, but for that price I want it with all the options." Woman: "Great. Oh, and one more thing. The house we wanted last year is back on the market. They're asking $950,000. Man: "Well then, go ahead and give them an offer. But just offer $900,000. Woman: "Okay, I'll see you later. I love you." Man: "Bye, I love you too." The man hangs up. The other men in the locker room are looking at him in astonishment. Then he asks, "Anyone know who this phone belongs to?" A man walked out to the street and caught a taxi just going by. He got into the taxi and the cabbie said, "Perfect timing. You're just like Brian." Passenger: "Who?" Cabbie: "Brian Sullivan. He's a guy who did everything right all the time. Like my coming along when you needed a cab. Things happen like that to Brian every single time." Passenger: "There are always a few clouds over everybody." Cabbie: "Not Brian Sullivan. He was a terrific athlete. He could have won the Grand Slam at tennis. He could golf with the pros. He sang like an opera baritone and danced like a Broadway star. And you should have heard him play the piano. He was an amazing guy." Passenger: "Sounds like he was something really special." Cabbie: "There's more. He had a memory like a computer. He remembered everybody's birthday. He knew all about wine, which foods to order, and which fork to eat them with. He could fix anything. Not like me. I change a fuse and the whole street blacks out. But Brian Sullivan, he could do everything right." Passenger: "Wow, some guy then." Cabbie: "He always knew the quickest way to go in traffic and avoid traffic jams. Not like me. I always seem to get stuck in them. But Brian, he never made a mistake, and he really knew how to treat a woman and make her feel good. He would never answer her back even if she was in the wrong, and his clothing was always immaculate, shoes polished too. He was the perfect man. He never made a mistake. No one could ever measure up to Brian Sullivan." Passenger: "An amazing fellow. How did you meet him?" Cabbie: "Well, I never actually met Brian. He died. I'm married to his widow." Two elderly gentlemen were sitting on a bus bench when a stunning young blonde in a short skirt got off the bus. One of them leaned over to the other and said, "Boy, I sure wouldn't mind getting a piece of that." The other old-timer chuckled and replied, "Yeah, me too, but these days mine just doesn't work anymore." The first guy grinned and said, "Don't you know how to keep it working?" Curious, his friend asked, "No, how?" He replied, "You've got to eat a lot of French bread." Determined, the second man headed to the store and bought 100 loaves of French bread. At the checkout, the cashier raised an eyebrow and said, "You know, all that bread is going to go stale before you can eat it." The old man beamed and replied, "Oh, so you've heard about it too?" Quick reminder, every 1,000 subscribers and likes equals $100 to help a senior in need. Hit that subscribe button now and be a part of this.